This is Coach Aaron Saft and the Running is Life podcast. Today's guest is Coach Will Frantz. I met Will out at the USCA Ultra Running Coaches Conference in Colorado Springs just a short few weeks ago. And we definitely have a lot in common. And it was a pleasure to talk with Will, not only at the conference, but on this podcast. We're sharing it across both of our podcasts, which I'll link Will's podcast in the show notes. Will has a really fascinating background, and this requires a part two. We talked a lot about me and not enough about Will, in my view. So I'm going to have Will back on and talk a little bit more about Will, some of his coaching philosophies, and things he thinks about when he's coaching and what he does with his athletes. He's got a great background in strength training, a bit in nutrition, so a lot to share from Will. I really enjoyed this conversation with him. Will also brought to my attention that one of his friends lost his home in a fire, and so directly following this intro, I am going to put in a clip that you can help if you can. They've got a GoFundMe for this poor gentleman that's trying to raise funds for his house, and if he reaches his goal and goes over, he's going to donate the excess to charity. So have a listen if you can help. Obviously, that's tremendous. Not everybody can, but I wanted to put it out there because all you can do is ask. And if you've got money to help this gentleman, that's wonderful, kind of put his life back together. So again, I will put that next after this intro, and then we'll get into the conversation with Will. And then after that, I'll catch up with you guys in the conclusion and catch up with everything that's going on here in the world of running is life. So thank you. And thank you for your attention to this. And there'll be more links in the show notes from everything that, GoFundMe and everything. So check out the show notes for all of that information. Thanks, and I'll talk to you at the end.
Hey everybody, it's Will Frantz, a friend of mine, Ray Berlanga. You may know him by his Instagram handle, Ray Runner, or maybe you've seen him running with his Chihuahua Tapatio at a race or around the Anaheim area. Ray's condo recently lit on fire through no fault of his own, and now he's in kind of a tough spot because insurance can take forever, and he is going to have to take a lot of time off work to deal with this whole mess. So I decided to set up a GoFundMe account to try and garner a little community support for someone who's been a kind, shining light in our ultra community. If you're in a place to help Ray, I know he'd really appreciate it. If not, we completely understand. Money can be tight, but if you're able to donate a little bit to one of our own in the trail and ultra running community, Ray would be incredibly thankful. I asked Aaron after we finished recording, and he was gracious enough to allow me to share this message as well as the GoFundMe link. So thank you for the time, and I know Ray really appreciates it.
All right. I've got Will here with me. Will's coming from Phoenix. Is that right?
Utah.
Utah. Oh, Utah right now. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Salt Lake City.
Dude, no, I went to school in Arizona, and I'm running in Javelina next week. So that's kind of where 2 or 3 weeks. So that's kind of where that came from in your brain. Yeah.
But Utah, Salt Lake City. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
There we go. Yep. Had to ring a ding.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Man. And you're in Asheville, aren't you?
Yeah, just outside of Asheville. I am between Asheville and Brevard. Yeah, it's a nice, nice little spot.
I need to make it out there at some point. It's not a spot that I've spent really any time in, but I have friends in, so I need to go do the thing. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's as you were talking about before we got on. Leaves are starting to turn here, starting to get the colors. So it's pretty. It's not the Northeast so far as colors go. The New England gets some of the more maples get a little bit richer in oaks. But it's definitely I love this time of year. So
for sure.
But yeah,
same.
Will, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? We'll share this podcast on both platforms. So my listeners may not know Will Frantz, but why don't you make it so?
Man, I don't know where you want me to take that. So I coach running. Aaron and I just met at the USCA Ultra Running Coaches Conference, or whatever long name that entails there. And
How'd
I
you
coach
get
people
there?
who like to run really far. How did I get there? I drove
Yeah.
there. And
No, how'd you get to being a coach? Where did that come from? Where did Will
God,
all of a sudden be like, hey, I think I want to be a running coach? Where did that stem
that is actually kind of a weird trajectory. So I hated running for a very long time. I played sports since I was a kid, but I was like, running was always a means to play sports, right?
from?
So the track practices and the workouts for wrestling and everything, like I was not the fast guy and did not have a great relationship with the running aspect of things. And that held true till like probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know. I went to school. I was going to be a lawyer, decided not to do that, taught English in Korea, came back. I worked in the ski industry for a while. And while that was really fun, driving snowcats and making snow flat at night, it was exhausting for a lot of the wrong reasons. And I also, I don't know. I just wanted to do something a little, what I feel is a little more, right? Like I wanted to help people with their health and fitness because my dad died when I was like 26. So I got really kind of obsessed with the health and fitness stuff of it.
Sure.
And he had hep C, so it wasn't like a direct causation of that, but it was still like a rabbit hole I dove down to in my slightly neurospicy brain. So I ended up deciding to become a personal trainer and a nutrition coach and worked with like general population for a little while. And it was nice, but it wasn't really, I don't know. I don't like marketing to fat loss, if I'm being honest. And that's like most of the population in this country where you're talking like health and fitness. But like I grew up as kind of a fat teenager. So me putting more of that language into the like sphere of the world, I don't find personally helpful. So I was like looking for some other places, and my ex's dad was an ultra runner. And I like ran into a bunch of ultra runners and realized that their nutrition and strength training wasn't stellar. Run programming on point, but like the nutrition and strength work, not great. So I kind of came at it from that direction and then got, again, a little on the neurospicy spectrum of things, obsessed with it. And a few years later, now I do all the things, but that's kind of how that happened, man. I don't know.
That's a great way to get into it, though. I mean, you did it for the right reasons, like that's really cool. And not because you were just, this person that had been running their entire life and wanted to transition to something like that. It was an honestly good reason to do it. And that's oftentimes, the right reasons make good coaches, because they care. And that's the biggest thing about coaching, right? Is just that you care. You listen, you watch.
100%, dude.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I mean, I think you're a parent, right? And I feel like it's kind of the same kind of thing. Like they've shown nobody knows how to parent correctly. Like there's just studies all directions, but it's like the biggest thing is, do you care? And if you care, then the children tend to have pretty good outcomes. And I feel kind of the same, but to a lesser, I don't know, priority risk ratio when it comes to coaching.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, it's, I mean, coaching is so much more. When I'm around the youth, right? When I'm coaching around the youth,
Sure.
Something that I took out of Ted Lasso, I feel like everybody should watch Ted Lasso. Like the world should watch Ted Lasso because the underpinning is just making people better, right? Like we all want to be the best versions of ourselves, and we want to help others find that version. And I think Ted Lasso it made me inspired even more so to do that for any live I touch, right? Whether it be the kids that I coach, the adults that I coach, my friends, like I want to make sure they're getting out of life what they want. And if I can help them get there in whatever it is, talking to them, whatever, that's awesome. And I love that, every time like I'll be on Instagram or something, I'll see a Ted Lasso video and it usually invokes a tear because it is just so powerful. I love like today I watched the dart scene. If you're familiar with the dart scene where, that scene. And if you haven't seen that scene, you need to go on YouTube and just type in Ted Lasso dart scene, because it is just amazing. And it's on point. There's so many good pieces and takeaways from Ted Lasso, but my athletes have called me the Ted Lasso of running because of, I joke around a lot, but I also try to bring the best out of people. And Ted Lasso is he's an inspiration to me. Like I can't, like the parallels and things that I take away, and I use a lot of his phrases. But yeah, it's truly is a joy. And that's why my company is running his life, because it came from Ted Lasso. Football is life, from Danny and his
Love
joy
that.
for running.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And that's where, I find joy in running, and I want to express that joy. And that's, so that's where my company came from.
That's cool, man. And I mean,
Yeah.
I want to like dive into a little bit for, my people. I'm sure your people know
Sure.
this, but like, how did you get into this sport? Like I like kind of looked at your background a little bit and saw that you have opposite of me been doing this a while.
Yeah.
Like what kind of
Yeah.
brought you to this? Like what brought this joy to this for you?
Yeah. So my running career started when I was in middle school, 8th grade.
Cool.
And I was a soccer player. Go back to Ted Lasso. I was a soccer player.
Yeah.
That's who I was. That was my identity. My friends were soccer players. I knew soccer. I liked soccer. Wanted to play soccer, and I went out for the we called it modified soccer, which is our middle school team. And in 8th grade, we were allowed to try out for JV, and if you were good enough, varsity for high school. And we had a time trial, a mile time trial, and my mom bought me these new cleats, and mom wasn't too big on getting like the really nice soccer cleats that like all my friends had, and they hurt my feet, and I didn't want to run a mile in them, so I took them off and I went barefoot. And we were on the soccer pitch, so we were just running around the pitch doing this mile time trial. I ended up lapping the varsity guys, like just barefoot, and my coaches were like, hey, this soccer thing, like, we don't want to deter you, but like, you're not going to make JV, but we're thinking you should probably go off cross country. And I was like, what's cross country? Like, I had no clue. Like, I had never heard of this sport, and I was like, what do you do? And they're like, you just run. And I was just like, that's kind of weird. Like, why would anybody just run? Like, that makes no sense. So I approached it was my health teacher. And, I said, like, hey, they said I should come out for cross country. And she's like, have you run before? I was like, well, I just ran this mile time trial, and I told her my time. She's like, oh my God, get on the course. And so I don't even remember what I ran, but she stuck me out there, and I ended up winning the meet first time out. Like, I was just like, whoa, this is amazing. And then like, that the realization that I could have success at this sport just, kind of just evolved. It snowballed. Obviously, I just, from 8th grade on to now. So that was 1990 for me. To now, I've been a runner through and through, high school, college, post college, and just kind of grown in distance over the time. My first ultra was in 2008. First 100 wasn't until 2016. So, a good span there to kind of build into. And I never thought I'd do 100 miles. I'll be honest. Like, I even told my wife, I was like, why would I ever do 100 miles? It was kind of like, why would I ever run? And then this trophy spurred me on. I was like, wow, that's a really cool trophy. I want that. But in order to get this trophy, I had to do 100 miles, which ended up being the Grindstone 100 for those that know that race. I
was going to ask, what was the 100?
So that was my first 100 miler. Was the Grindstone 100 miler back in 2016. And the trophy was for the Beast Series, which is now defunct, unfortunately. But yeah, so I've got the Beast Series trophy on my mantle. It's right next to my Grand Slam trophy. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, the trophies really do spur me on for some reason. That extrinsic value.
I mean, whatever pushes it forward, man. I'm gonna shut this door real fast because there's a dog losing its mind outside. Now, yeah, I mean, whatever pushes you forward, I think is really the key there.
Yep.
And I do have a question that I noticed, because like you were, I don't whatever you want to call yourself, but like definitely like prodigy to some degree. Like if you're that fast off the gate, like that shows a ton of natural talent, right? And I feel like there's like, we all have that aspect. I have chosen a path that does not play into mine. Mine is picking up very heavy things off the ground. Like if I trained to deadlift, I would probably be very competitive in powerlifting. It's not what I love to do, unfortunately, but whatever. So you kind of found this love. You're very good at it. And in middle school, high school, that tends to cap out around 5 kilometers, right? Like for cross country. What pushed you to these like longer distances, especially when you were having success at the shorter stuff?
I guess the new challenge, right? Like, it's
Sure.
not to say that I mastered anything. There's no mastering anything. It's just
Yeah.
kind of that curiosity, right? You've got the angel and the devil on your shoulders, right? And the angel's like, oh, stay nice and short. It's easier, and the devil's like, no, no, let's go harder. Let's go longer, And it's like
Yeah.
you've got this like conflicting, like, well, like, I'm good at this, but like let's try this. And to be honest, like I've had some success at 100 milers, but for the most part, they've beaten the snot out of me, and I've not had great success. So it's something that
Sure.
constantly challenges me, right? Like I can make it through a marathon, and I could probably run a decent time at a marathon, but like you put me up at 100 miles, I don't know what's going to happen, and that's kind of the cool
Okay.
thing is the question mark right before the start. You're just like,
Like that.
what's going to happen? Like let's roll the dice and see what happens. So it's I like that aspect of it is just not knowing, because there's so many variables and there's so many uncontrollables, and it's just constantly problem solving, and that's something that the Grand Slam really showed me is because really, I mean, I would say, at least 50 to 65% of the 4 races that I did not go to plan. Like there was something that was totally off. Western States and Wasatch for sure. Those were probably 2 of the toughest races of my life to make it to the finish line. And, that's what, really spurs me on. That's what gets me going, right? Like that's what I'm eager to get to that place and just be like, oh crap, like I am in trouble. Like, what do I do? And
Short pause. What is the Grand Slam for those of us who aren't quite
okay.
sure?
Yeah.
And then I would love to hear about like what went wrong and
Okay.
like how you fixed it and stuff like
Sure.
that.
So the Grand Slam is the 5 oldest 100 milers that still exist. Okay. So we start in the beginning of the summer in June with Old Dominion, which is in Virginia. And then it's Western States in California. And then third race is Vermont 100, which was canceled this year, and we had to find a replacement race due to the flooding in Vermont. The fourth race is Leadville, and the fifth race, which you have to do, is the Wasatch 100 by you in Salt Lake City. You can choose 4 of those, but again, the one you have to end with is Wasatch. You have to complete that. So you pick 3 of the others to complete. And, if you've completed those 3, on to Wasatch. So that's the Grand Slam. You have to do them in the course of the summer, right? It's all done in 1 year. You have to sign up for it. You have to actually register for the Grand Slam. And then at Wasatch, they hand you your trophy inscribed with all the races that you did, which is really cool. So yeah, they have an
So I know a
inscribed
lot of those
thing.
races have like raffles and entries and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
do you, by applying for the Grand Slam, do you get to circumvent some of that, or do you have to
No.
be exceptionally lucky?
So yes, you have to be exceptionally lucky, or you can
Okay.
be creative like me. I put in for the raffle for Western States.
Okay.
I bought an entry to Western States, we'll say is around 400 and we'll say $10. So I purchased $410 worth of raffle tickets, and I was one of 5 selected for the raffle. So I knew a year in advance, because they draw that at the pre-race meeting. I knew a year in advance that I was going to run Western States. And I was, I was fortunate enough. So I said, well, this is my opportunity for the slam, and I have enough time to prepare. I can know ahead of time. So I started looking at Vermont and Leadville and saying, okay, these are lotteries. How do I get into these? And then I found out they have fundraising opportunities. So a big piece of my why and who I am is I like to give back, and that's really gives me a drive to do these things. So Vermont raises money for the Vermont Adaptive, which is for challenge athletes and providing equipment for multiple sports for these athletes to be able to compete and just participate in sport. So I raised money for them. And then Leadville has 5, I believe it's either 4 or 5 different charities that they allow fundraising spots for as well. And I chose the Challenged Athlete Foundation, which has, very simple or very similar principles, and they do the same as like the Vermont Adaptive. So I felt it was very cohesive, and I got a spot raising funds for them. So I bypassed both the Vermont and the Leadville lottery. Well, and technically Western. And then for Wasatch, if you don't get in, which in my case, I did not get in the lottery, they allow a provisional spot based on the fact that you finished 3 of the other Grand Slam events. So if you finish 3 of the others, you are automatically put onto the start list for Wasatch. I was the only person out of 17 that did not get into the Wasatch lottery. I was the only person on that provisional list waiting to get in. So when I finished Leadville, I contacted them and they sent me the registration, paid my fee, and in I went. So yeah.
Awesome, man. That's really cool. I love that I love that you're doing some of that for like charity and fundraising as well. Cause like I think that's an underappreciated avenue to get into races. I mean, it's for a good cause. You get to run. I've heard people complain about some of it sometimes, and I just couldn't disagree more. Very honestly, I love that you're doing that. I think that's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it afforded me an opportunity, and based on like what I found out, what was wonderful about both organizations is they actually showed us the lives we were affecting. When I was, awesome. They gave me a welcome packet, and when I got to Leadville, and with it was a note card, a postcard of Olivia, who I helped, or who my money's helped purchase a racing wheelchair. And then they gave me a bracelet that she made with Olivia on it, and that was on my wrist the whole time of Leadville. So it's like I said, it was great raising the money and actually getting to meet some of the athletes, because they actually competed at Leadville as well. Some of the athletes that are part of that foundation, which is really cool. So it was, definitely a wonderful experience, being able to give back and being able to race. So I enjoyed that. Absolutely.
That's incredible. I love
that.
Anyway, Grand Slam and that's how you get in. That makes sense. So
yep. Cool. Yeah. And then you asked what went wrong and how did I problem solve?
Yes, please.
So Western States is, and if you don't know Western States, it's one of the hardest races to get into. The lottery is massive. So many entries trying to go into this one lottery to get a spot to race. So, you appreciate your spot on the line. That's one thing. And that's also a determinant when you're in that race to remind yourself you have this spot. You better make the best of it, because you don't know if you're going to have that opportunity ever again. From the get-go, from the shotgun blast that started us up the escarpment, I was just like, something's wrong. I don't feel good. Like, I just did not feel great. I was just like, like I didn't have my normal vitality, my normal energy. It was like, I was just like, what is going on? Like, I just had a hard time. I was like, all right, well, I'm in the snow, for those that don't know, this year there was still a lot of snow for the first 30 miles. I was like, maybe it's just the snow. Like, I'm just, just kind of bogged down. I'm having a hard time. I didn't train. I never got to train in the snow here in North Carolina. So I was like, just, we'll get through these first 30 miles and we'll see how we're doing. I got out of the snow and I was just like, it's not the snow. I'm just having a bad day. And I came to that realization. And, like, a lot of times the goal is to break 24 hours because you get a silver buckle. It's an actual silver buckle, which is pretty cool. And I quickly realized that was not going to be the case. Today was not going to be the day that I was going to break 24 hours. What was scary was I going to make the cutoff of 30 hours, right? Like, I had never been pressed to cutoff times, but it was becoming a reality. I was struggling mightily. Anything that I tried was not working. Like, you go through, is it my nutrition? I was having problems with nutrition. I was getting sick. I was getting nauseous, and I was trying to keep stuff down, but I was just having the hardest time. I was like, was it my hydration? And I tried consuming more, having electrolytes. I went through, problem solving after problem solving. And I was just like, came to the, just the conclusion that today was a bad day. And I was really just going to have to fight this. So, I finally got to my pacers around mile 62, and it was going into the night. And a lot of people are, way ahead of me. And I was just, I just got to keep moving forward. But then it became, because of everything and how tired I already was, I was just getting so sleepy on the trail. I had to lay down 2 or 3 times just to take a dirt nap, and fall asleep for a little bit, just because I was so tired. I was like falling asleep on my feet. My pacers are, trying to keep me from falling into the Rucky Chucky River, because I was just swerving, off the single track.
Yeah. And
it was everything I could do, just keep moving forward. So this went on to mile 80. And finally the sun rose, and so the sun rose. this is 24 hours after the start. And my body was like, oh, we remember what you're trying to do. Let's go run. And so the last 20 miles, I just ran and I was back to, normal Aaron and running. And it was just like, a switch in my body just clicked at that sunrise. I got a little bit of more food in me and things were just rolling. And I ran the last 20 miles. I felt great. I can't tell you what it was, why, it's just something was off for 24 hours. And then I was able to finish it, and, Wasatch, I got really sick the day before. I knew I was getting sick, and it manifested the day of Wasatch, and my throat was like on fire. I lost my voice. I could barely talk to my pacers. They would ask me a question and I was so hoarse. I'd be like, hey, I need water. It's like I was struggling. I ended up having a fever.
I'm sorry,
We
that
called my
sucks.
wife. It was rough. It was a rough day. She's a doctor and
Man.
she's like, give him some Tylenol and keep hydrated, and we made it. Like I got through the night. I had to take a few more naps during the night, but we ended up pulling it off and finishing it. But it was those two races, it definitely tested just about everything I had. I finished an hour and a half before cutoff in Western, and I finished probably another hour and a half before cutoff at Wasatch. So it was, they were fighting. It was definitely,
Man.
but we made it. So but
That's awesome, man. I mean, congrats on
thank
those,
you.
and it's a
Thank
big
you.
deal. And I'll say, like, especially going into them, feeling like garbage. That's
Yeah.
I
But
I don't know,
again,
I
that's
take
why we do
something
it.
from that sometimes it's just like persistence
Mhm.
and maybe fighting through it for a
Yeah.
while as long as you can and seeing
Right.
if something changes. Like,
Well, and then just having
yeah.
a reason, right? Like what, if
Mm,
I was hell bent on finishing, and that's what you have to be sometimes, like, and being okay. And this is something that I teach my athletes is being okay if A goal goes out the window, if B goal goes out the window, and you're left with your C, which is just to finish. Some people just aren't okay with just finishing, and that's what you have to talk to yourself about prior to racing, right? Like, am I okay with just getting in under the final cutoff? Like, if you're not, then you're probably going to stop because it's just a grind, right? Like, some people are like, how did you walk the last 50K of UTMB? I really wanted to finish. I didn't go to Chamonix just to not finish UTMB. I went there to finish the race, and that's what it required was hiking the last 50K. People
yeah.
are like, I just didn't want to hike it in. That's their choice, but like ultimately
Yeah.
you need to decide that beforehand when it comes to it. Like, what's your decision? Because then, if they're like, they stopped and they're kicking themselves, you probably should have kept going. Right. But like, if
100%.
you're decided, I'm okay with stopping, then when you stop, you also have to be okay with the fact that you stopped. So,
Yeah.
like, make up your mind ahead of time and be okay with those decisions. So,
It's funny. I was just having that conversation with somebody yesterday about a javelina and setting A goals and B goals and whether just finishing was good enough and that kind of stuff. And I don't really, I'm not here to set your goals, right? Like, I'm here to
yeah.
help guide you through them. Pardon me. But like, it is really useful to know what are your cutoffs prior. Because I
Yeah.
mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we look at, I think it was 2 years ago, Courtney pulled out a hard rock, and it was because like she's feeling hurt and whatever. And I mean, it's Courtney and Walter. She could finish, but it wasn't what she wanted, right?
Right.
Like, she wanted to do well or not get hurt,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And that's a fine goal. And I mean, it kind of depends on what your actual listing is,
Yeah.
and you need
Right.
to go into the race with that, because there will absolutely be a point where you're like, this sucks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is it that, if you're going to be, hurt and it's going to take a lot of recovery time,
Yeah.
or, you're going to be a little hurt and have less recovery time, that should be an easy decision to pull out, right? Like, when we're talking injury, but
Yeah,
it's
you think
when it
so.
just gets tough, right? Like, that's the
Hmm.
question, right? Like, that's the moment, right, where you have to decide, like, is this important enough to me to continue forward? Do I have the mental capacity
Absolutely.
to, and you can always hope things are going to get better. Like what's the saying? Like that, I think it was Dr. David Horton. He's like, things don't always get worse, or something to that effect, you hope so,
Yeah, exactly.
that's the hope.
Yeah.
Right. And, it's a lot of times it's the reality, but you have to give yourself that chance. And a lot of people in the moment, they just don't give themselves that chance. But
Yeah, I think it's very true. And just like, it is going, if you're doing anything for that long, right? I think this is one of the things we often forget with, like, 50Ks and up, or hell, marathon and up, like, you're not going to enjoy it the whole time. Like, I have very few activities in my life that I want to do for 3 hours straight to a day straight, right? Like, I don't know. Right, like, I like a lot of things, but usually, like, I'll be here and I'll be programmed to whatever, and like I'll really enjoy it, and then I'll like go take 3 seconds and be with my dog and then come back, and like we break these things up in our day. Whereas like when you're running 100-miler, you are going to be running for a day, and it's very rare that you do anything with complete joy for a day. And I think it's kind of it's important to recognize that there's going to be pieces that you just don't want to keep going. And then if you keep going for a while and that lasts for the entire thing, you're just like, I'm done. That maybe that's the right choice, but to some degree, like, push through it for a half an hour and see, because it's
or
really
make it to the next
normal
aid station, right? Like, it's
not gonna be there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And having the tools sometimes is, part of the puzzle, right? Like having the mental tools to be able to deal with some of these things. And that's a lot of things that I talk about with my athletes. We always talk about Addie Bracey's book, The Mental Training for Ultra Running. That's like something
I love that book.
Yeah. So that's something that, like, if my athletes are doing a hard event, a long event, whatever it may be, we go through and make sure that they go through some of those activities and that we talk about those, right? Like, just say, like, hey, on this run today, I want you to think about this, right? Like, on your long run, like, think about this component right here. I'm not saying you have to give me an answer after this long run, but I want you to think about it and think about these situations and what could pop up, right? Like with Javelina, what are you dealing with? What are the environmental conditions? Like we talked about at the conference, right? Like, what are you planning to do with that? And then, if things go south and you're not feeling good, like, how do you deal with that? What are you going to remind yourself to do, or how can you work through when you're going through, those tough moments? So it's, that book is wonderful. So much in there. So, it's like I said, people, I always recommend it to anybody I encounter, because I think it's such a great book, and she did a great job with that, just kind of making you think through a lot of the tough times and how you're going to deal with them, and giving you some tools to deal with it as well. So,
I honestly forgot all about that. I've been like diving into Justin Ross's stuff recently and like kind of put Eddie's on the back burner. I need to like reread that book. It was really good when I read it. I think a year ago. It's a super important piece.
His talk was probably one of my favorite. Dr. Justin Ross.
It was fantastic.
I was scribbling like feverishly, just like, please continue, go on. It was so fantastic.
Yeah. I was talking with like Brian Passetti for coffee the day after, and we were just like, I honestly wish he could have gone on for 3 hours.
I do too.
The restructure on that.
I think
it'd be so important.
Coop had just done I subscribed to his research essentials, and he had just done a thing on the emotional intelligence. So, having the background from that and then hearing him expound upon it, was just like, it just put a cap on it. And I was just couldn't wait to share it with my athletes, because we had just talked about it. That's like one of the things, like I told you, we do Zoom calls, and one of the Zoom calls we focused on, the research essentials, and specifically around that emotional intelligence. And it's just like, preach on, Dr. Ross. It was awesome.
That's awesome, man. I love that. And that Zoom call thing is the thing I'm going to start doing. I think that's a really helpful thing, because there's all these things that I want to like. I have like a Discord channel that I kind of throw things into occasionally, but the Zoom call I think is a really smart choice. So on that note, I guess, like, how do you seem to have a really well structured community of your people. Like, how have you built that? Like, what have you done to like build this lovely community of people you have?
So I look at us as a team, a collective team. I've always enjoyed my experiences. There's very rare times where I can say I did not enjoy my experience with being with the team, right? Like there's just so much about being around and building yourself around a team. So
Hmm.
like, that's what running is life. We're a team, right? Like that's, we refer to ourselves as a team. Our Facebook team, posts, like we have a private group that we, each week we say who's racing. We don't go into results because I don't want the people to feel, like shy or embarrassed if they, didn't have a day. So we just talk about who's racing. And then everybody, they're like, hey, good luck. And then like, it's awesome because then in that post, they start posting pictures because I send text to the groups that are doing the same races, and they find each other and send pictures in. And so they start to get to know each other. And then like, if they're around each other, they try to get together and do stuff together, like, running. Like I've had, just people that have just like met each other through, perhaps it's like one of our group runs or a race, and then they just start training together because they met each other through either a race or something I've done. But it starts to create more of a collective, and people start to get that team mentality where we're rooting for each other and cheering each other on, collectively helping, because I tell them, I said, I do not have every solution. That is beyond me. I have not tried every product, like, so this community is where you can ask and feel comfortable to ask any question you have, whether it be on gear, nutrition, places to run, races people have done. So that's what the Facebook group has become, is just a safe place for people to, to get to know each other. Not only that, but to ask questions. So, and then like, the team meetings, we do the Zoom calls twice a week, right? Everybody hops on there. People talk about their experiences, their races. So like, they get to see the face, not just the person on Facebook that's making the comment, but they actually get to see the person and connect visually with that person, right? So they get to know them, what they look like. Then they show up at the race and they're like, "Hey, John, how are you?" Now it's a connection, right? So making those connections, it's just providing opportunities to make those connections, and then it just forms the bond. It's like, yeah, I'm the coach, but it's the same thing when I do with my middle schoolers, right? I try to provide opportunities for them to feel more cohesive, to feel more as a team, to give them, that more of that ability, that let them control this. Like, it's not my team. And that's what I tell my high schoolers from the start. This is not my team. This is your team. I want you to build it, the way you envision it, be a part of it in whichever capacity you want to. Now, not everybody's going to buy into that or be a part of that. And some people, they say, well, I didn't feel like I fit in. And, it's nothing that I did. It's nothing that anybody else did. They're not trying to isolate them. It's just they're not used to having that sort of relationship. And that's okay.
Sure.
Like, I always tell people, I and my environment may not be the right, kind of fit for you. It's that's
no, it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And
so
yeah,
that's kind of the down and dirty of it. Just
no, it makes a ton of
creating
sense,
those
man.
opportunities.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I love that because like I have really good one-to-one relationships with a lot of athletes and people. I'm very introverted, like deeply introverted, and I'm like working on trying to, create a space for those who are less, autistic and introverted than me. And like it's kind of a tough thing. And I appreciate that, man. Thank you. And part of it, and I couldn't agree more with you on the I'm not for everybody aspect of things. I do love your note for Ted Lasso, and like I've absolutely brought a tear to my eye occasionally. Like you'll know the scene. He's talking like Trent Krim, and he's like,
"Yep,
Trent, you're a great writer, all this stuff, but I'm a coach, and that scene always like makes me very I don't know, touches me. But I have a hard bent of like Roy Kent in me as well. Like, despite this podcast, like I swear a lot, and it's just one of these things that I know I'm not going to necessarily be a great fit for everybody, and I just think that's one of those things, especially with finding a coach. Like we were just around like 100+ coaches for a whole weekend, and in no way did it seem, like anybody cared, right? Like it's not this like competitive environment. It's like, let's just help people, man. Like it's a really hard sport. If we can just help people get across the finish line and achieve their dreams, like that's all that matters. And I think that's kind of a lot of it. Like you just got to find your vibe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's, I mean, I realize sometimes when I listen to other coaches talk that like I love coaching, but like
Me too.
like there's certain times where I'm just like, I need to remove myself from the situation. Like it's like, like it gets a little too much for me sometimes. And I felt that
Mm,
sometimes at the conference where I was just like, I'm gonna remove myself from this situation just because like it's getting a little too much for me. Like, like we're getting a little too much into the weeds, and not that that's wrong. Again, to each their own.
sure.
Like, there's some people that just love to just nerd out 24/7, but I need to step away sometimes. Like I got to take off my coaching hat every now and again. It's that's the reality.
Yeah.
It's like I do, like, I respond to texts all hours of the day because
Same.
there's stuff that comes in, and that's important. But there's also times where I just need to take it off and I need to shut off my phone and go for a run or just be with my
I get
kids.
that.
Like, yeah, I do need that. And and I realized that at the conference too. Like there was just times where I just needed to step away and be like, this is a time where like I'm not at that capacity to keep my coaching hat on. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's I think that's healthy with anything, right? Like there's times where like we tell our runners, maybe today's not the day to go run, right? Like we got to realize that sometimes, right? Like that's
Yeah,
the time to step
absolutely.
away, right? Like, oh, you're oh my God, you got COVID. Like oh my God, you can't even get out of bed. Why would you go run? Like, so there's times where we all have to step away,
Yes.
and I'm guilty of it too. Like, there's been times where, I had Bigfoot last year and I got COVID and I was like, oh my God, I gotta run. But I was like, I can't run right now. I'm too tired, like, so you got to learn when you get to step away. I'm getting better. I'm not
Yeah.
100%, but I'm getting better at knowing when I have to step away from certain situations. So, situational
It's a
awareness.
hard balance,
Yeah.
man.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
I definitely haven't figured that out at
Yeah.
all. Like
Yeah.
it's a
Oh, yeah.
it's a thing I'm working on and trying to recognize, but it's not a balance
It's
I
hard.
play well at
No,
all.
it's hard. It
Yeah.
really is. It really is. And like I said, I'm getting better. I'm 45 now, so I've had a little bit more experience, and I know a little bit better when I
Yeah.
should step away. But and the other part of it is like I'm not as competitive and I'm not as competition driven as I used to be, and I think that helps when we're so focused on a goal and training and getting this certain mark. Then it's really, really hard for you to step back and to step away. And like that, you also have to recognize that piece too, is like you're too close to it and you're too focused on it, whereas like now, like I actually stay back and just look at the big picture and I'm like, does this make sense today? And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I try to get my athletes to, is being able to take that step back and say, no, today it doesn't make sense. And that's when they text me and say, hey, not going to happen today. I'm like, fine, let's move it. But that's I think part of the coaching thing is like, it took me a while to get to that point myself, recognizing that there's like, we need to move things around. It's not just like a concrete schedule. And that's like one of the first thing I say is like, if you look at your week and there's something that like I programmed and you're like, can't happen today, you say it and we move it. That rather than miss it or be stressed about getting it in, let's move it. That's the big thing. So
Couldn't agree more.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I have large pet peeves about many things in coaching world. I think it's actually not so much in this world. It's that I like also work in gyms and fat loss and stuff, and I see a lot of stuff there that like makes me feel very uncomfortable, and I talk about it a lot. But it's like the general concept of like keeping someone beholden to you,
Mm-hmm.
not a fan, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like if we can, I think as a coach, your job is to educate in many ways, and educating. I don't think you need to. People do not need to know their entire muscle structure like I do. I understand that, nor do they care, right? Like
Right.
I have a few doctor clients. I know more about muscles than they do at this point, and that's how it should be. This is specialties, right? Like I don't know meds, right?
Right.
But they should know enough to be like, yeah, so this workout matters and I can't do it today.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we restructure this?
Absolutely.
And
Right.
100% be able to make your own training decisions. Whereas I see some people like not explain any of that and hit the plan, and they get frustrated when they can't hit the plan and do this. And I'm just like, that's not your job. Then just sell a plan.
Well,
Like,
and
100%
explaining
agree.
it, right? Like I think that's another huge component. And that's again where these Zoom calls come in. Like, we can
Love that.
tell an athlete,
And you coach a lot
just
of people,
finished.
so like
Right.
super helpful, man.
Yo,
Yeah,
totally.
absolutely.
And
I love
having
that.
that explanation, like, because when you tell an athlete, okay, you've just finished your A goal, I need you to take 2 weeks off. They're like, do what? Like, well, that's where
Oh, man.
that's where the Zoom call comes in, right? Like, all right, let me talk to you about why, right? Let me explain to you the science behind why I'm making you take 2 weeks off. And then they're like,
Yeah.
got it. Like 2 weeks off makes
Yeah.
sense. Like it's going to make me better in the long run because of, X, Y, and Z. And it's explaining those
Yeah.
factors. Now, like this conversation that I just had, I recorded it and sent it out to everybody because not everybody can make every Zoom meeting, right? So like when they get the
Sure.
recording, I'll get a ton of messages within the next few days. They're like, I get it now, like it
Yeah.
rings, it resonates, right? And it may draw more questions, which is great because then we can have more conversations and it's meaningful to them because they're learning, right? And that's part of this
Mm-hmm.
coaching thing. A lot of times we just write a schedule and we're like, here you go, and we don't explain what the intricacies of that schedule is. Why is there a rest day
Yes.
following my long run, or why is there, why
Mm-hmm.
is there this workout, and why are we doing this, workout and this system so frequently? Like, what is that all about? But explaining
Sure.
that to them, they're like, that makes more sense. And then
Yeah.
moving forward, they're more on board with what you're doing because they understand the logic behind it. And
100%.
if they don't, and like that's what I always say, if you don't understand something, ask. If I can't explain it, there's probably not a good reason why we're doing it. So
Yeah.
but knowing those reasons
There's a
behind it,
reason why this thing is always here. Right? Yeah.
right.
It's like,
Yep.
yeah, I need to answer questions. Like
Yes.
it's here
Yep.
all the time. Like yes, I just
Yep.
step away more, but that's for that reason, man. Like I agree. I couldn't agree more.
Yep. Yep. So he just held up his phone for those that are listening to the audio.
Yes, we're often listening to things. Yes, my phone is attached to me like a third appendage, which
Yes.
isn't always great, but it's what
Right.
it's
Yep.
it's part of it.
It is. It is. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and so like if we're looking at some of the takeaways from the conference, I guess we talked about that. What were some of your big ones, especially since you've been doing this a lot longer than me? Like what really hit for you?
Yeah, as number one was Dr. Ross. That was my favorite talk of them all. I loved Dr. Tiller. I thought his like pseudoscience talk was awesome. It just kind of re-emphasized it re-emphasized a lot of the things that I try to share with my runners, and saying, hey, listen, let's not waste a ton of money or time on some of these ancillary things that are saying that, you're going to use these to recover, because they're not, enhancing your recovery. They're wasting your time and probably a lot of your money if you're a healthy runner, as they said, right? That was the big thing, if you're a healthy runner, because there is still some uses for those if you're not. But yeah, that
100%. But even if you're not, like, couldn't agree more. And it gave me such a chuckle. Like I laughed through that entire thing because it's just like we've all had these conversations about those. And you're right, like if you're healthy, but even if you're not healthy, like you could probably do better with like some banded strength training than you would with like $1,000 recovery boots. Like it's just
right.
It's not the big rock. Couldn't agree more.
Or just run a little bit more, right? Like
100%.
There's that too. But I mean, it's but yeah, that Tiller and Dr. Ross, those were like some of my favorite talks. Like I loved Stephanie Howe and her talk on nutrition. Also, like every time someone brings up the menstrual cycle, which we just briefly touched on the end, it's still kind of reignites a spark in me to say that's something I need to be better about, and talking with women about their menstrual cycles, how it affects them, when it affects them, planning accordingly, and that one was a big star on my page, because it's one of those things that, when it's mentioned, I'm like, yes, I need to do that. And then I'll start implementing it, but somehow it starts to fade and I forget about it until it's mentioned again. And I'm like, dang, why did I forget about it again? Like bring it back. So there needs to be some way in which I become more consistent at that. And that's one of my biggest takeaways is, like I really need to just kind of be consistent about it and try to figure out a way. I use Training Peaks. I need to figure out a way in Training Peaks to be a little bit more consistent with communicating about that. I've got over, I was of the age where it was like taboo to talk about the menstrual cycle with women. I've gotten over that. Like that's just me being honest. When I first started coaching, maybe it was my immaturity, but it wasn't something that I was comfortable talking about. But
I
now,
don't think it was just you, man, and it wasn't just your age. Like I'm
yeah,
really open with it, but that's because my parents are pretty open with it about me.
mm,
Like I have a lot of people my age who are like
yeah,
still kind of weird about it, but
yeah.
it's like this
Well,
part.
my
Half the
never talked
population
about
doesn't,
that.
man.
Right.
Like it's
Yeah, no,
fine.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something I had never talked about. But now,
Fair.
like my high school athletes tell me, when they're in cycle
Awesome,
so
dude. Good for you.
it's an open line of communication. So yeah, but that's definitely, that was a huge one. And like I said, even though we only briefly touched on it, it really was something that, resonated hard with me. Those were my big three.
Same.
How about yourself? Did you have any others?
The last one for sure. And like I've taken a few women's health classes and whatever, and to like understand cycles, and it has been enlightening. And I don't dive into it too much because one of the things I have really learned is it's incredibly individual.
Mhm.
If we take the general science, it's like if you take the general science, then programming around the menstrual cycle is actually nuts because it actually like almost belittles the process a little bit. Whereas if we don't intake, whereas what we really should do more often is take individual needs into account, which is true for everybody. It just tends
Mhm.
to be more like regularly true for those on a menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
And if we like I would have loved about 3 more hours on that topic.
Mm,
Same with the
sure.
psych stuff.
Yeah.
And I think everybody kind of agreed there. And I have talked to a few people who are on the same page, and I have a strong feeling that that's going to be one of the pieces of feedback for it. Because, yeah, and I'm going to actually on my podcast have Faith come on and talk
Nice.
about it as well. Because I think it matters. I know
Yeah.
it matters.
Oh,
So,
totally. Yeah.
yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
But that and the psych stuff for sure, I really would have loved more in that because I
Mm.
think I don't know the old joke of like it's the running is 90% mental or whatever. I mean, it is true to some degree. Like if we just look at cutoff times for most ultras, like you could walk half of them and finish. It's that it's like an insane activity
Yeah.
to be doing.
Yeah.
At some point, you will not want to keep doing it, and that you need to choose to keep doing it. So yeah,
Yeah.
the psych aspect I think was really worthwhile and reminded me that I need to dive into that more. And then this is me just being more of a cheerleader than actually beneficial, but I loved Heather's talk because I do think strength training is deeply underappreciated. Probably in general from working in a gym, but definitely in the running community. I think the longer we go through sports, so like in the 70s, strength training wasn't appreciated as a valid training metric for football because they thought it would make you muscle bound and immobile. And then it went to like baseball and then went to whatever, right? So if we look at these like really big basketball somewhere in the 80s, I believe as well. And if we look at these like big high money sports, like they just keep more and more adding strength training to the required regimen. Like golf now, even like you would think not, but they've actually associated strength with how far your drive is. Like that's Tiger kind of changed that entire game on that front. And if we look at running, I think it's just kind of behind the curve on that front. Like Richard Blagrove wrote that strength training for endurance athlete book forever ago. And it's actually pretty good. Like it's actually held up a lot of it. But I just haven't seen it permeate to the general community. And so I think Heather's talk, especially like being first, coming from her with someone who has such like a background in the community was really,
Mhm.
really worthwhile. And
Mhm.
I hope it integrates. And
Yeah.
on my end, I'm going to start doing a like strength only option in case people want it, because it is that's more my specialty than just running.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I understand the running, I understand the run programming, but literally day to day I work in a gym having people pick this stuff up off the ground. So
Right.
I
Right.
think strength is an important thing, right? So like I'm really glad that was discussed, especially since I know Coop has had kind of an off and on relationship with it in the 2 series of his books. I think coming around and understanding that there's like a wider discussion to be had was really mature and wonderful. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, totally. Yeah, it's I couldn't agree more. I'm a big proponent of strength training. My no matter where Coop had come from or said or done, because like you said, he's been on both sides of the fence.
Mm-hmm. And I
And
understand his perspective. I want to
mhm,
say like that. I realize like he's an incredible running coach. He also works
yeah,
with people who make their paycheck running. And
right.
if I worked with people who made their paycheck running for, I mean, you're not going to make your paycheck running for more than probably 15 years. And then you can kind of do other stuff, right? So if we look at baseball pitchers are a really good example. Like they are inherently imbalanced and they have a ton of tears, but they make a ton of money.
Yeah.
If they make it to the major leagues by being imbalanced and having the strength curve. So like when you coach people of that caliber, it is different. But if you're looking long term, it also is different. So yeah, I totally get Coop's perspective, but sure. I was very appreciative
when we look
of
at the
general
masses, exactly. And that's who we're coaching is, everybody, right? Like, I mean, we may have some elites, but we're also coaching mid to back of the Packers, and the mid to back of the Packers, they're they're really, susceptible to injuries as well, right? And that's the people that we want to make sure are healthy enough. So, programming 100%. The strength is, if we're taking, and saying, hey, we're going to insert, 20 to 30 minutes of strength 2, maybe 3 times a week, like depending on the phase we're in. Like this is, something that's going to keep you healthy. It's going to make you stronger. Like we're going to benefit from this. I think it's definitely warranted. And, actually, Dr. Tiller just had an article in Ultra Running Magazine, last month's issue, about strength training. Funny enough. And, he talks about adding in strength training, and making sure that, you're not doing strength endurance, right? Like we're not trying to lift lighter weights, high reps. We're doing heavier weights, 60 to 80% your maximum, one lift. And then, just doing 4 to 6 reps and then doing multiple sets, and that's what I did this morning. Like I did a deadlift workout this morning. It's so like, I try to practice what I'm preaching to my athletes so they see it, like my stuff will pop up on Strava too. Like, that's so, and I'll be honest, if I'm slacking, they'll hear it on the podcast. Like, I've neglected this or that, and it usually manifests in an injury. It does. Like, and I'll be like, that was my own dumb fault, like that's the reality. Because I get it. Like, people are busy. Like, I understand that too. So it's finding that balance. That's the tough thing, is finding the balance to get all this stuff in, and still meet your goal. So, sometimes we have to be creative, and talk about it. Like, is it worth missing, an extra hour of sleep to get this stuff in? Not if you're already getting like 6 hours of sleep. Like, like we got to focus and get some sleep here. I need you to recover. So there is a balance, there is a balance to this. So, but
very glad you said that. Yeah. So I end up on that front a lot too, where I don't know. I think everything is to be had this longer conversation. We end up in this short form media topic of where everything needs to be consolidated into like minute sound bites. And I get it. I really do. But also it can't be, period. Right. Like whether we have the nutrition conversation or the strength training conversation, like there's benefits and trade-offs to everything. And like, should you fuel every run? Probably. If it requires, should you fuel every run with a meal? Probably. If you're running at 5 a.m., should you wake up early to do that? Absolutely not, man. Like right. You're not sleeping enough anyway.
Oh,
like,
totally.
It's a tough balance. And as long as you get on that front, like if you get your calories equalize the rest of the day and get enough protein, like it's probably fine from most data, but it's really hard to do when you're running and you have a cortisol spike and it drops and you're hungry, right? So like, this is why we have these conversations and try to short track it to a 60-second soundbite. But if we're going to have it, it takes hours. It's just hard. So I like the long form stuff like this, but it's complicated. If it weren't complicated, like you and I wouldn't have a job. It's tough. It's a tough thing.
It's a tough balance. Yeah. And then, I mean, but having a team too, right? Like that's part of it. Like, I reached out to Meredith Terranova, who's she's a great person for nutrition.
Awesome. I like her a lot.
Yeah. I've worked with her in the past. And, since COVID, like I picked up an additional 15 to 20 pounds that I just can't seem to knock off, which makes my running a little bit harder, so I just reached out to her and I was like, hey, like, I need your help. Like, I'm obviously doing something wrong. I'm just, whatever we need to do, I need to talk and I need to get on board with, getting myself back. So knowing who to reach out to is part of this, right? Like with the strength training component, right? Like we got to make sure they're lifting in the right way, right? Like, I mean, like, form is essential, right? Like I can't just prescribe this and be like, it's a woman that's, she's in her 40s and she's never done a deadlift. Like, hey, listen, like I need you to find somebody in your area that can teach you these lifts. you may not have to go for like more than like 3 or 4 sessions, but like I want to make sure you're doing this properly so you don't get injured. That's part of it too, right? Like we can't just say like, hey, go
Absolutely.
lift. Like, so like we have to be responsible about these type of things. And like they talked about at the conference, like know your lane,
Yeah.
where are you straying? Like, like, and that's, I had somebody ask me about an injury yesterday. And I said, well, listen, like, if it's compensating your form, that's no bueno. Like, stop running.
Hmm.
And you need to see somebody. But either way, if it's really painful, like that, I would say, like, go make sure it's not going to become worse, or it's something that, we don't know and, can get worse. So, having
Yes.
the capacity to know your limitations and know your knowledge, that's a huge piece too, which at first that wasn't like, I didn't even think about like, like because I had been through so many injuries. I'm like, oh, plantar fasciitis, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But like now it's like, no, like, like go talk to your PT. Like we need to make sure this is you're doing the right things. Like, that's not my job. Like there's people out there that's their job, and that's what you have to see them for. So
100%. And like, in the depth of your lane too.
mm,
Like I've kind of built a coaching practice that's very like moderately shallow and pretty wide. It's like I mean I have certs across everything, but I'm not a PT, right?
mm,
So like kind of knowing that. But I'm like currently taking a multi-month course on injury rehab work. So that like kind of helps bridge that gap. Because I do see that a lot in person where it's like
sure.
they're done with their PT, they're not covered by insurance anymore and they can't afford it, but we do this. Like what's the subset there, right?
Yeah,
So like
right.
finding that connection, but also I don't talk to people with hormonal stuff because even though I know a lot about food and nutrition, and that is actually one of my like deeper lanes, I don't have that. So
Yeah.
like I
Right,
will, I
right.
would absolutely send you like Steph, right? Like I'm not
Yeah,
gonna do that.
yeah,
So yeah, 100%. And like just kind of knowing where you sit in that front is really important so that you don't
absolutely.
get someone hurt. Because I love the, I mean, what you say, like the biggest thing is do no harm, right?
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's it's hard sometimes just to keep your run coach hat on because there's so many
Yeah.
facets, and not because sometimes we're the psychologist, or we're we're the
Yeah,
strength
man.
coach. It's like, so like there's so many hats, but again, like knowing the depth of
Hmm.
how deep is your lane and how deep is your knowledge, like that's a tough thing for a coach sometimes.
It's hard. And
Yeah,
I'm not
for
saying
sure.
there's a clear answer either.
No,
Like
yeah,
you get to
that's
skirt
really
that
hard.
line a lot
Yeah,
and it
right.
sucks.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But I mean, at least you can refer somebody to somebody else, and you can
Yeah.
say like, here are my thoughts, but the reality, that may not be right. So like, I would
Yeah.
definitely get somebody that's going to give you the right answers. Especially when it comes to injury. That's the biggest thing.
100%.
Like
Yeah.
obviously the first thing we want to do is get you back to running healthy. So like, first step would be, let's get this, figured out. But yeah, so I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
coaching is complicated. Like it's
Yeah,
it's it
man.
is a complicated place, and the communications can be very convoluted sometimes, right? Like you start going
Yeah.
down an avenue and you're like, whoa, this person may need a little bit more help than what I can actually give. Like, how do I approach this?
Sure.
Like, what's the best way to talk to this person about this? And I've had coaches that have totally said the wrong thing to me, and that's like, where did that come from? Like,
Oh
like
man.
maybe take a few steps before you throw that curveball, like, so, it's tough. Like, I understand that. And I didn't, I try not to judge them, but like,
Yeah.
again, it's like, we're trying to do what's best for the athlete, but at times we just may not be in the right ballpark. So,
For sure. 100%. It's a hard balance, man. But
yes. Yeah.
I had a question. Like I know we're on like an hour and I don't know what your time frame is, but did want to ask you a thing, and it's kind of a hard left turn, but like what drives you for these races? Like ultra running is a crazy sport. Like
Mm,
I kind of had this conversation with everybody. Like it's nuts. It's not a thing that
yeah.
we're really,
Yeah. Yeah.
is reasonable. What makes you do this stuff?
Yeah.
Why?
This took me a long time. It really took me a long time to figure out, and it wasn't until recently, very recently, Leadville recently, that I really
Wow. Real
solidified.
recently.
Yeah, I
Nice.
really solidified this answer, and I talked about it on my podcast. But So, my deepest tool is my love. And it's my love for my family, it's my love for my sport, and it's my love for my community. Those three loves drive me. And I can use that as a tool to get me out of any despair when I remember who I love and why I love them. Because when I look back and I see the reactions that I've created by doing these things, by pulling myself out of the darkest places, all because of love, and using that love and telling them it was because of you, because of how much I love you. That's what brought me out of this, right? And that in turn, it creates a tighter bond and a deeper love for the people around me. My wife is probably my grounding rod. Like the Flash is like my biggest superhero. I love the Flash. And he has a ground rod, right? And that grounding rod is his wife. So that's my wife to me. Like she is my grounding rod, and a lot revolves around our love. And when I think about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, is a, a big reason is because I owe her a lot. Ken Kluber said this in his pre-race meeting, and it's what's really struck home to me is you owe a debt to those that have been a part of your life and a part of this experience because of how much time you've committed to training for these things, how much time you've taken away from those you love, how much financial commitment you've had to make to all these things. When you think about it and you're like, I have a huge debt and I need to pay it to those that I love. So that's another piece of it, right? Like when I sat there at the halfway point and I was like, how do I get back up to Hope Pass? Like that was hard just getting up the first time. How do I go back up the backside? My legs were spasming, I'm like, I was in deep debt. Like I was like, man, like, how am I going to get up? And then I thought about it and I said, like I got to go back to, I owe it to my crew that's on the other side, the pacer that is waiting for me to get there. He drove all this way to be with me. I haven't seen him in 7 years. I need to get my butt out of this chair. Right. And so that, just that love for my friends, my family, that got me up. And I started moving. It wasn't fast, but I started moving. And when I started taking care of myself, it wasn't long after that I was moving well again and I was back in it. But it took that moment to reflect on, what was going to get me out of that chair, to realize it was simply love, and love for, like I said, my family, my friends, for running, in the community. Those things are enough to drive me, and it gets me out of the deep of despair. But realizing that's a reason, realizing and gaining and enhancing my love for all of those things, that's a huge reason for this. It fills me with so much joy to be able to to have a richer and deeper connection with those people.
That's beautiful answer, man.
Thank you.
And I love that. You also basically said you like figured that out a couple months ago, right? So like you've been running for over 3 decades. Like what has that always been the driving factor and you just haven't had that?
Yeah,
or
well,
like,
no,
was it something different earlier? Like
there were pieces, right? Like I knew there were pieces of this, this greater understanding, right? But they were segmented. I didn't understand the connection. It wasn't until Leadville that I connected all of it together, which has made me such a different person, like just in my mind. Like, I have a deeper drive. Courtney talks about it as the pain cave, right? That's what she excavates, this pain cave. It's, it's something different to me. Like I have this deeper connection. Like hers is to pain. She wants to find that pain. I want to find more joy, more compassion, more of just love, for everything, and that's in those moments, that's what comes to the surface for me. It's not pain. Like pain is there, obviously, but how do I deal with it? She goes deeper into her mind. I go deeper into my heart and deeper into my emotions and connect there. And that's what brings the best out of me. With Courtney, it's digging into that pain, right? And just kind of, using that as her anchor. Mine is my emotion and my passion. Those things, that's what anchors me. So it's finding what anchors you and kind of gets you, out of that chair. Like, what is it? What's going to keep you moving? What's in that dark moment? That's what motivates me, and that's what drives me. And I think a lot of people could find that, if they have that deep love or commitment, but I think it's just, we don't know how to use that, right? Like, we don't communicate that a lot. I tell my kids, I tell my wife 100 times a day that I love them. That's a huge part of me, just letting them know they mean a lot to me, and I want them to understand that it's not something that loses its effect. My son, 16 years old, goes to school. Love you, Dad. Like, that's who we are, right? Like, that's a big part of our life. But if you don't say that often, if you don't freely express that, it's hard to get there. It really is. It's tougher to get there. So, like, you have to be able to express it, understand it, want to grow with it, like, and be accepting of others, and their love. So that's a tough piece. There's a whole nother avenue we could take about that piece and how I got to that. But
I mean,
yeah,
I actually am a little curious about that, because I think it's like one of those things that's really hard for people to get to, because I think it's an easy. You clearly have found a thing that's very important, but it seems, again, it's taking you like 3 decades to get there.
Yeah.
Like, what does some of that narrowing in, what does some of that look like for you? Like, I think a lot of us are searching for something when doing these races.
Sure.
And I think you might be running towards or running away from something, to like take the old phrase, but in general, I think there's some processing that you're doing when you're training 10 plus hours a week and running for a day at a time. And what does that journey kind of look like for you, and why has it been what did it look like along the way to lead toward this like place of love?
It's not something I've never really talked about this. But when I started running in middle school and high school, I was really bullied. I was, I was beaten, I was picked on. It was tough. It was hard. It was, it was really tough. I faced it and I took it. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't getting help from teachers or administration at the time. In the 90s, bullying wasn't what, it just wasn't addressed.
Yeah.
So, but in college, I found myself. I found my friends. I found my community. I wasn't running from anything anymore. Like, I was running and I was enjoying running, and I was enjoying my friends. I was enjoying the college experience. My family was loving. But it wasn't until after college that I learned to forgive. And, I harbored just negative emotions for a long time. And I was upset that, that people treated me that way. But then I realized that, like, I don't treat people that way. Right. It goes back to that dart scene in Ted Lasso. They were judging me for, what they thought I was. They weren't getting to know me. Right. Like, but then in college, they got to know me. People got to know me and liked me for who I was, which validated myself and allowed me to become who I am today. I grew, right? I grew in my emotional states, and I loved everyone. I forgave all that, that beat me, that mercifully teased me and picked on me. I just forgave them because I hope that they could grow to be better people. And that, like, I didn't want to stagnate. I realized that I didn't want to stagnate, nor let that become who I was, those negative harboring emotions. So I let them go. I let all of those negative emotions go. And I said, I forgive them. I never got to talk to them. I never saw these people ever again, but I can hope the best for them. And so moving forward, I was like, well, I don't ever want to treat somebody in any way that would, belittle them or make them think negatively of me, or, treat them in a poor way. So I became to have more actions to help serve and be a better part of my community. So after college, that was my commitment. I wanted to develop into somebody that can make a difference in, others' lives in my community. I started doing $5 5Ks, and every dollar that was donated, we gave back to a local charity, so just doing little things like that and making donations from any race that I put on. I did RDing for a number of times and created a 100 miler, and our 100 miler for the first 3 years I put it on, I didn't ask for a dime. Like I just wanted the 100-miler to grow and become, a staple in our community. So just these little things of trying to give back. And now my kids see that, my kids see, Dad, you volunteer for everything. You do everything for everybody else. What does that show them? It gives them a model to do something. Now they're like finding projects that they can do on their own and volunteer. And they ask, hey, can we help? That's the hugest thing, with being able to see the next generation now taking on the very ideals that I had. So that's what's kind of been formative to me and grown, my compassion for everybody, for whoever it is in the world. I understand. And there's still people that, will treat you poorly based on, be it the color of your skin, your gender, whatever it may be. Like there's still that. I'm not saying that has ever ended. It's just, I choose to try to be accepting that, that person may have gone through some things that have put them in that situation. And I'm not going to judge them based on that. I'm going to try to, tell them, hey, listen, like I realize I'm a white male. I get that. Then, there's a lot of stereotypes that come with being a white male, but I want you to understand, if I can help, I will. Like, no matter what you think of me or my gender or my race, I'm here to help. And I want them to honestly see that, and maybe that will change them. Maybe it won't, but I want to give it that opportunity to make a difference. And that's the biggest thing.
Great, man. I love all of that. More than I can tell you. Thanks for sharing that. And like I align with a lot of that. I got really pretty aggressively picked on in middle school as well. I've always kind of looked like this. So it was not physical. That would have been a poor choice on their part, but like it was a lot of shit. So yeah, I thank you for sharing that, because I also think it's really hard to forgive in that way. And I can't honestly say I'm necessarily fully there. So I think that's a big thing that
it took a while, man. It did
and get there.
Yep.
It's not those people. I actually don't care about them anymore. It's fine. But it's just like in general, I think the forgiveness thing is really hard.
It is
aspect.
Yeah, it is. It weighed on me for a long time. And I just decided that it was time to drop that weight, like it wasn't worth carrying around anymore. And move forward, right? Like keep moving forward. Like that, like Walt Disney said, keep moving forward. That's another big piece of of running his life. Keep moving forward. Like we need to keep moving forward and doing the best we can for everybody, and that's part of my coaching philosophy. It's just part of life.
Great.
So
100%, man. And I feel like it's I think you and I are aligned on most things. I really appreciate, I'm really glad I got to finally meet you. I've heard about you from Jeff for a while, but I'm really glad I got to finally meet you up.
Well, I appreciate it, man. We can do a part 2 sometime.
Yeah, it'd be lovely. I would love to do that at some point. I realize like we're running kind of long, so yeah, let's maybe
it's all good.
Table some stuff and
gotta get to the kiddos.
Yeah, no, I gotta go train someone in person and make sure that they're deadlifting correctly to key your point is. Yeah, so 100%.
Will, thank you very much for this opportunity, man. It's a pleasure getting to know you better.
Same. And we'll set up another one. Thanks, Aaron.
Absolutely. Thanks, buddy. Well, thank you to Will. Thanks for coming and talking with me, for sharing this across your platform as well. My goodness. Looking forward to part 2. I sure am. I enjoyed talking to Will. He had some great questions. And like I said, I wish it was a little bit more focused on Will and what he does and who he is. But that's the way the conversation went this go. But we'll have a part 2. That's to be announced. But thank you again, Will. And again, if you can help with the GoFundMe, please do. See the links in the show notes. It's greatly appreciated, obviously. Next podcast guest that I have on the lineup is Jason Green. Jason and I have a lot of things in common, from race directing to running to just our passion and love of life. And that's really what I want to get into with Jason, is more, his passions and his love and where all that comes from. I think it's a great conversation. We kind of dove into it a little bit on my behalf in my conversation in this episode with Will. But I want to hear from Jason. Really, I'm just starting to kind of think outside the box and create conversations with people that I really just want to hear from and, take their point of view and hear for what they're thinking, what goes through their mind. And, these are some great people that, I think have some great stuff to share, and maybe perhaps topics they haven't covered before. Like I said, next conversation is going to be with Jason Green, so I look forward to that. Also, be recording part 2 of my conversation with Scott Coomer. Scott is having me on 10 junk miles, so we're going to have a conversation. I'll let you guys know when that comes about, but stay tuned for that. I will make sure to post it on my social medias and such when that comes out. But it should be a fun conversation. Look forward to that as well. Haven't released the newsletter. I started writing it, and I have traction now, but I didn't want to rush it. Just to kind of get it out there. I didn't want to force it out there. So I'm going to keep working on it and release it when it's ready. I feel that does everybody more service, giving you full thoughts and not just, some forced material. So I'm going to keep working on that, and I'll keep you posted when that releases. I kind of think I'm not going to go on a monthly. I'm going to just kind of work on it, and as I feel it, it has the information I want it to, I'll release the newsletters. So they may be a little bit more irregular, but if you'd like to subscribe, you can go to my website, runningislife.run, and subscribe there. I also house all of the old newsletters and podcasts on the website. It's got information about my coaching. A lot of folks are reaching out right now. I certainly appreciate that because they've got 2024 goals. So if you want to talk about your 2024 goals and whether my coaching style is right for you, please let me know. I'll send you my call schedule and we'll set up a call and have that conversation. So for myself, I started looking into 2024 as I record this here. It's Wednesday. Let's see, what are we, October 11th. And today is the opening of the Hard Rock Lottery, and next year is the opposing direction that I have not run. Being in the Veterans Lottery, I'm going to put my name in and see if I get in. I'd like to run the opposite direction and then be done with Hard Rock, as long as I complete it, and get both directions. So that's my biggest lottery. I will put in for Western States. I have a lot of unfinished business there. That is the one race that I said I'd probably like to redo and take another stab at. But I only have one ticket. So, chances are low. So, but I'm going to start that, start those tickets accumulating again. And, we'll see what that brings. If I don't get into either of them, I'm going to drop my name into the, High Lonesome Lottery, another Colorado, High Ridge run. So, put my name in there. Also, if I don't get into Western, then I need, probably a Western qualifier, which I have to look again. Being a lottery for High Lonesome and no guarantee in getting there, I kind of want to have some backups to make sure that I have qualifiers. So we shall see. There's some backup ideas. I have some 100Ks, one being Never Summer and the other one being Beaverhead. 100Ks. So, I'll be looking into those and eagerly anticipating lotteries, as most of us are, to kind of set up my 2024. But that's kind of the early half of what I'm thinking for 2024. Running has started again for me. Just got back to training. On Strava, I posted, I'm doing some Z2 work, trying to stay in zone 2 and just keep the heart rate low and kind of rebuild that aerobic base. Not doing anything fast, workout strides, not yet. Just, like I said, just kind of rebuilding, about 3 to 4 days a week this week, probably 4 days next week, maybe 5 the next week, just kind of growing the amount of days that I'm running back. I've also re-implemented strength training And I'm going heavier weights. What I learned at the conference is that, we don't need strength endurance. We're already endurance athletes. So, little tidbit here. If we want to build strength, we should go 60 to 80% of our maximum. And 60 to 80% of our maximum weight that we can actually lift, one round or one set, or excuse me, one rep. So, I've been lifting, on the heavier side, working, just on, some, squats, deadlifts, just whole body movements, some cleans, going to get into some single leg deadlift, some, single leg split squats, lunges, that kind of stuff, just working on, strength. Cause, that's something I kind of, got away from as the Grand Slam went on. We did some core work, but no real strength. So, just trying to build my body back strong and healthy. So, trying to implement that twice a week. Which, is convenient because I have stuff down in the basement, so I can just go down there and lift. I don't really have to go far to lift. So, fortunate there, but that's something that I've re-implemented. I've kind of made a conscious effort to, re-engage with my active warm-ups. I have all my athletes do active warm-ups. There are a ton out there, and if you find one that works for you, that's great. We've got multiple, so kind of varies up what you do and how you do things. So I'm trying to re-implement those as well. And I did an episode on active warm-ups and stuff, so you can go back and check that out. I've got an active warm-up on my YouTube channel. You can also check that out. I'll try to remember to put the links in the show notes for you guys. But so yeah, lots of good stuff going on. Next week, I turned 46. So when this episode, or when next week's episode comes out, that is my birthday. So, we're celebrating another trip around the sun. Pretty excited about that. And, other than that, just enjoying the fall, and I hope you are. I hope your training goes well. I'm going to try to be out at shut-in and volunteer at an aid station, one of our local races. Got to look at my calendar. I'd like to volunteer at the Looking Glass 100K. I've got a number of athletes that are running both shut-in and the Looking Glass 100K. So going to try to volunteer at both of those. Also added my name to the hat to be on the board of directors for the Run 828 Foundation. Like to re-engage there and get back into the running community. I think I've kind of got a grip on life coaching, running, and I think it's time to add some of the components of being a part of the community and growing our community and trying to make the best of our community. So put my name in the hat for that. We'll see what the vote is. I'm happy to serve, but it is totally up to them. So. So that's going on. You can also put your name in for the Run 828 Foundation. You do need to be a resident of North Carolina to be a part of that. Again, Run 828 Foundation, they host the Hellbender 100, which registration just opened for. I am not affiliated at this time with Hellbender 100, but of course it is near and dear to my heart, as it is a race that I helped start and race directed for a number of years. But that registration is live now on Ultra Signup, so you can go check that out. And I'll try to remember to put another link in the show notes for the registration page, and the Run 828 Foundation, the board of directors for Run 828. I'll put that link in the show notes as well. So lots of stuff in the show notes today. Lots going on. If you guys have questions, comments, please send them on. I really do appreciate, all of the feedback that we had from my conversation with Scott Coomer. I got a lot of positive feedback from that episode, which was wonderful. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. Appreciate the new Patreon support. Candy Bates just became a Patreon supporter. Candy was a previous athlete, so I really appreciate that, Candy. Thank you very much for joining Patreon and supporting this podcast and keeping me going. Hope to keep engaging with some great guests. Really enjoyed my conversation with Jeff Stafford, and it sounds like some of you did as well. So, if you got ideas for guests, people you want to hear from, or you yourself want to come on the podcast, please let me know. I am sponsor free. I don't want to engage with sponsors to influence what this podcast is, what I talk about. So the Patreon support does mean a lot. It helps me keep this going. So thank you all so much for being a part of this podcast, for listening. If you can, share this podcast, like it, review it, all that good stuff helps other people see it. Share it if you found something of value that you think somebody can, learn from or, help. So please, keep it up. I really appreciate you guys. Hey, running is life, and keep moving forward, my friends.